As you can see here with the PowerPoint, you all know who I am, the interim director of the center. Here are the norms that we have established previously about keep yourself on mute. If possible, keep on your video, using the chat, raising your hand, and using our icons. This is what I shared last, 2 meetings ago. Once again, per your request, about the legislation. And as you know, this is what we're going to be working on and focusing on today, is that strategy. So as soon as I get your feedback, then we can be moving it through our state pipeline and then publishing that. So thank you again. The assessments, this is going to, the second part of our presentation today, or our meeting today, as Dr. White shared, will be about the reading assessments. We started to, information was shared. I do want to catch you up with the work over here with the higher education. So this is a new check mark. I am so appreciative of the many colleges and universities who've been reaching out, wanting to partner, wanting to be a part of this work. So thank you to so many of them. I was able to meet with the deans and ed prep people last week with our talent office, and they're very excited about the legislations and the next steps moving forward. So I will be working with higher ed and pulling together a group of individuals from the various colleges and universities to be talking about next steps regarding the teacher prep and working together around the science of reading and evidence-based reading. So that was pretty exciting. So thank you once again to all of them. Just as a review, so the reading strategy that I'm going to be presenting to you today, I'll show in chunks. If any of you then want me to send it to you so you can really review it and make changes to it, please tell me. This strategy by legislation, these are the things that it shall include. So we must include rigorous assessments, reading, research, and instruction, external literacy coaches or coaches who are working with the data, reading interventionists, training the teachers and the administrators in scientifically based reading resources and instruction. It shall outline the data analysis, leadership development, family communication, training for teachers and leaders, and student progress reports. While I'm pulling that up, I'm wondering, and Fran, I apologize, but I'm wondering if you can talk about last night. We had quite an exciting evening. The State Department is working closely with CAPS. So if you don't mind, Fran, sharing that exciting news.
No, I never mind sharing it. Thank you for the opportunity. We have embarked on a partnership. It began 2 years ago. We began planning for the science of reading training that for leaders that will eventually go statewide. We started to CAPS I went to the commissioner and asked her if we could think about this partnership using the ESSER dollars, and she was right on board. Frankly, I thought it was a tremendous strategy for equity, and I really do believe in early reading, and I believe in the science of reading. And so we embarked on a partnership, and we planned for well over a year, and it took off in June of this year, June of 22. We had meetings with our first cohort of 12 districts. They are urban, suburban, and rural. And this is a series that continues throughout the year. It is on the science of reading. We have national presenters. We led off with our own Margie Gillis as our first national presenter. And we have others coming every other month and they spend a day with us with teams from each of the 12 districts. Together with that, we have 4 executive coaches who are newly retired superintendents with a good solid knowledge of reading, as well as 4 reading coaches who have been language arts directors, reading teachers, etc. They work with these districts on site, and they do embedded professional development, yes, about the science of reading, but also about what it takes to bring about change in a school district. We've had phenomenally good feedback from cohort 1. We've done 2 nationals now. We did Margie Gillis, and we did Heidi. Is it Heidi that we did in October, just last week, no, October 11th. And both of them were wonderful. We meet with affinity groups. Each executive coach has 3 districts. They meet together, and we're learning from them as well. So last night we launched cohort 2, which is 12 more districts. We gave them an information session last night with dinner, and we insist upon superintendents being involved in this. Superintendents and central office, as well as people from the schools, because I'm a firm believer that if we want real change to happen, the superintendent has to be on board. So cohort 2 started last night, and it was just a very uplifting event to sit and, you know, it's sort of a dream for me because I've worked on the science of reading for a really long time, and to be able to have the resources through the ESSER dollars and through the leadership of the commissioner, along with Melissa was there, Joanne was there, and Irene was there. And it's just it's a very good time. And if I can be really totally upfront, I have to say that it was such a positive event. And, you know, over the last few months, there have been a lot of issues and challenges that we've been dealing with in reading and CT SEDS and a few other things like that. But this was totally positive with everyone wanting to, I think that we're around that table wanting to get involved. So thank you for letting me share. It's just been a great experience. And we're hoping that we continue these cohorts until we have the whole state trained.
And then a shout out to your team as well with Dina and Ema and Terry. So thank you to all of them.
I left out one thing, guys, and we also, part of this is designing modules, and we just have completed the first module. And the reason for that is these modules will be online. They will be available to everyone. They're around all of the components of the science of reading. And we wanted those so that it's kind of succession planning. It's also making them available in real time to the district leaders, principals, language arts people, so that they can use them to train their teachers. As we move forward and the ESSER funding is done, and we're hoping that the legislature will provide us more funding, but also we know that modules will continue the work.
Right. And what's so wonderful about this experience, and then I do see 2 hands up, I don't know whose hand was first, is that it's really focusing on that leadership aspect, like Fran was saying, with the superintendent, assistant superintendent, directors, multilingual learner directors. So it's really focusing on those structures and the systems and putting those in place. Dr. Gillis, did you have your hand up? And then Kim?
Yeah, my question was just, can you name the districts that are in this cohort, Fran?
In cohort,
might not have this in front of you.
In cohort 1, Melissa, help me. I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's, and Joanne, it's East Haven, it's
I know
Waterbury,
Stratford.
Wyndham.
Stratford,
Derby.
Bethel.
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 Who are we
Yep.
forgetting?
Goodwin.
Learn. Goodwin.
Learn. Right.
Goodwin, yep. Goodwin and Learn.
Learn.
Correct.
I've got to think about,
I
it,
know that we're
but
leaving people out and we apologize for that.
we apologize for that, but,
I knew about the cohort 1 because I was with them this summer, but I was curious about the districts that are in the next cohort as well.
oh, well, we don't know yet. We know
Oh,
who came around the table, but,
I gotcha.
you know, we have more than, we're cutting it off at 12 because we feel like that's how we can give quality attention to each district. And we had, you know, a few more than 12, but we had some very small districts, which I'm really pleased about on the eastern part of the state. They don't always get a lot of attention. So we had small districts and we had one of the, you know, large cities. So hopefully we'll know who that cohort is by next week or the week after, I'm sure. And we begin work with them on November 30th.
And then Kim, did you have questions too?
Yeah, I was just I just had a question, and maybe it's just because I'm newer to the group, but Fran, you were saying that this started like 2 years ago, but this legislation just came about, I think, like 18 months ago or so. So I was just curious to know, like, was the Science of Reading coming to Connecticut regardless if this legislation got passed? The council that we're on, had that not been developed, it would have still been coming?
Kim, that's a great question. And yes, it was.
Okay.
You know, the legislation certainly was there, but we began this planning prior to that. As soon as the ESSER money came out, you know, I'm in touch with the commissioner all the time, and that was one of the first calls because I really, you know, I was at the State Department. I was associate commissioner when we did Reading First, and Reading First wasn't perfect in the early 2000s, but it was a phenomenal experience. And we did this kind of work in the Science of Reading. And then we did the kind of work in going out and working with individual districts, and people, you know, 15 years later say to me, it was some of the best training they had. I didn't do the training, but Margie did it, for example, with the Haskins Institute, and the RESCs produced modules, and it was great. And so we wanted to recreate it and make it better.
Awesome. And then just one other question. A friend of mine works in Ridgefield, which is not my town, but a town near me. And they were saying, I guess they had just, and it might be separate. And so I'm hoping this is not irrelevant to this group, but they apparently, I guess Ridgefield just purchased a reading program not too long ago. And now they're understanding, I guess they were at a Board of Ed meeting and they were talking about money. And they were saying they were now going to scrap that and bring in a new reading program. And I didn't know if it was, they didn't have any more information than that. Is that this reading? This isn't mandatory, is it, to all?
No.
Okay.
No,
So-
this Science of Reading is training separate from all of the legislation around mandated reading programs, et cetera. We're you know, my belief, you know, I've said it often on here. My belief is there's no silver bullet for the teaching of reading other than the Science of Reading, and there's no one program that we should be depending on. But this, I do believe that having effective teachers in front of a class and being able to have teachers well trained and grounded in the Science of Reading is what we need. So this started, but doesn't have anything to do with the programs, Kim. Long
Thank you.
answer.
Right. And yeah, thank you so much. When you look back at the work that we as a council have undertaken, we've actually done a lot. When you go back to our first meeting, and that's when we really all came together and started talking about like the science of reading and what is the science of reading, and using that document that Hanover had put together around the research that was done years ago. That term science of reading is a newer term, and it seems to be catchy because people can call it SOAR, S-O-R, right? So Margie's smiling, and Dr. Jenkins smiling as well. So the evidence-based practices research has been around for a long time, and the legislation was created separately from the science of reading and from this evidence-based. It was created to support districts in moving toward these practices around evidence-based reading, instruction and assessment and professional learning. So the science of reading is not something that came about because of the legislation. It was actually the other way around, where legislators said, hey, there's a science out there, and it's important that districts are aware of it and are utilizing the science when they are picking the programs that they're using, when they're training teachers, and the same for the higher education. And that's why that's in there as well, you know, making them aware that there is this evidence, this research base that needs to be guiding what we are doing every day in classrooms. So from that came that legislation, and I'm not even sure if from that is the right word, and Stephen, feel free to chime in here if I'm not representing it correctly. I just think it needs to be, it's one has been around for a very long time, and the other bubbled up as a result of wanting to support districts and making choices for students based on the research. Anybody want to add anything to that? And Kim, I hope that's helping with your mindset, because it is. Okay.
It does,
Margie?
because you know what, I remember now going back and talking about, like, we were kind of focusing on creating something for Alliance districts, right? Not so much all districts, right? It was to support districts that maybe wouldn't have had the resources or such to do this on their own, correct? If I remember right from the beginning.
Correct. So that's how the legislation started, was really supporting those Alliance districts and the opportunity districts. And then in this last iteration, it expanded to all districts. So all districts having to choose one of the approved programs, all districts having to choose assessments that are hitting all the areas of the legislation that Dr. White will be talking about. Margie?
Yeah, just to follow up with what you just talked about, Melissa, because you're right, this research has been around for decades. And I'm old, so I can talk about learning about it in the 70s at the University of Connecticut. And it's just been expansive since then. So decades, 5 decades of research. What I will say that's changed, and Mike, maybe you can jump in too, is that we know a lot of the science, the basic science. What we haven't really got enough of, this is my opinion, is what does it look like in classrooms? What is the translation of that science? And what should instruction look like based on that science? We don't have enough research studies that really guide us, because it's really challenging to do research in classrooms. You know, that was the work that we did at Haskins with the Institute of Education Sciences. We got a great grant to study what first grade instruction should look like. And we learned a lot through that experience, and we continue to learn. But I feel that that's where the rubber meets the road. What how can we guide teachers to know that if I do this with this group of students based on this data, that I'm going to get this outcome? And so I feel like the impetus behind the legislation, the Right to Read Act legislation, is if we put the materials, the programs and the materials in teachers' hands that we know are based on the science, and then we give them the support they need, the coaching support that they need, the embedded professional development, and really guide them as they implement those research-based programs and materials, then we're going to get a better outcome than if we just give them, freedom to choose kind of, I hate to say it, but a lot of teachers do go on Teachers Pay Teachers to get lessons to teach children. That's not a good use of their time and their resources. We want to give them the goods to get the job done. So I think, just building on what you're saying, we still need more of the translational research to keep this body of research moving forward, and to be sure that we're giving the teachers what they need.
And the professional learning that we provide, so the masterclass that Fran was discussing, ReadCon, which is something that I've mentioned in the past, the Connecticut Literacy Model work, those aren't focused on certain programs. Those are really focused on the science and the evidence. And, how does that then drive what I'll be sharing today, the strategy, and what parts go into this strategy. Before I do that, Stephanie, is your hand up? And hi.
Hi, sorry I was late. Yes, my hand was up, and I was going to say that I agree very much with Margie about kind of providing teachers with more strategies, or with like step-by-step approaches. And I'm glad to hear, Melissa, that you're going to share those strategies. I was wondering if we had come to a point where, what am I trying to say? So I guess when I think about strategies for like student success and strategies that should be used in the classroom, I always immediately go to like Hattie's work. And so I've shared that a lot of times, especially with high school teachers, about things that you can do in your classroom that really will have an impact on student learning. And I know that Fisher and Fry's book about like visible learning for literacy really goes hand in hand with that. So I'm just wondering if we got to a point as the council where we said, like, yes, we are endorsing this book or this set of resources or these strategies for doing reading instruction in the classroom. And if we haven't, maybe we do get to a point where we select some resources and then say, yes, these are state approved or state endorsed resources that could help you. So just wanted to add that.
And thank you so much. We have not yet gotten to that point where there are certain books or, like you're talking about John Hattie and how he does these meta analyses and really, trying to find out what are those nuggets for instruction. We've been focusing pretty much on what the legislation needs us to do right now and the timelines involved there. So, I think it is a neat idea to, at some point, we could kind of come up with ideas for a resource library or some things that have been helpful and putting them online. Once again, as long as they are evidence-based and really steeped in the understanding of the science of reading and those literacy practices, I think that would be a great idea. And I think it does piggyback nicely, once again, with the strategy that, if you don't mind, I'll share now so that we can give Dr. White time to do the assessments. So thank you so much. Once again, we never quite know where our conversations go, but they're always really, really enriching, and I appreciate that. This strategy, like I said, is legislated, that a literacy strategy is created and then posted. So what I'd like to do now, of course, is share that with you. I've tried to put side by side, excuse me, the requirements from the legislation next to the literacy strategy. So I'm going to share this now, hoping that they're big enough for you to see. I know that the slide's kind of small here, but I can't. So these are the things over here on the slide that must be in this reading strategy. And over on the right is the strategy. So that this was shared with some of our literacy partners before and came from the work that we've done through the years. The research is here in this link. And once again, if there's someone here on the council who really wants to dive deep into this, I would love for you to do that. I can send you this draft. You can really look at it if there's a couple of you, and then I can get that feedback back for next week. But for right now, I'd just like to use the time. I will be quiet. I will let you read. I will then move the page down. When you're ready to move, just like thumbs up. All right, thanks. I'm seeing some thumbs. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to scooch it down just so you know too. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be taking hand old-fashioned notes here on one that I wrote. So definitely we can stop and talk, or you could put your comments into the chat. But do know also, I forgot to say that everything we've been talking about at these meetings, I've been capturing in notes and trying to reflect it here as well. So if you feel I've missed something, definitely tell me. So then it breaks it down by different groups. And Stephen, do you have a question?
Melissa, this may be more of an academic question, but is there any differentiation in this proposed strategy between districts that may have the triangle upside down, right, which means a large percentage of their students needing targeted scientific and research-based literacy interventions, and those districts that may have the triangle closer to how we'd like it to look, meaning most children are accessing the skill set, but for a few that need targeted interventions that are identified through assessment, is there a differentiation in the types of strategies that a district might take based on what it sees before it?
I will say that this is leaning on the science and the evidence for all. Mm-hmm. So it's really important that they are establishing these structures and systems across the board, regardless of what type of district or school, and like you're saying, the students with whom they're working. Mm-hmm. Especially in districts where there's a lot of movement, it's important to have those structures. So then regardless of who is at the helm, can be keeping the work going forward. And that's a lot of what like our master class is discussing right now, and learning about not only what practices should they be seeing in the classrooms, but how to create these structures. And I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm just wondering whether there's an and maybe Mike knows this, whether there's an implementation science approach that differentiates not on the substance, which is what you're describing, the level setting, but differentiates perhaps the intensity, the focus, the assessment, the response, that sort of thing.
So much like our students based on the needs of the district or the school. Mike and Fran, I see both your hands up.
Yeah, thanks. I think that, Stephen, that's a great question. And I think, I mean, I'm just looking at this now at the sort of bottom bullet there, which is that, you know, the specific district and school plans are really based on an internal needs assessment of, you know, where their strengths are and where their areas of growth need to be. So I think the idea is that, you know, we would hope that all schools and districts would have an assessment system and would have tiered intervention options. So, you know, high quality classroom instruction, but also intervention options for students that need more, a literacy team. But each of those schools or districts might have very different areas of focus based on where they are. And so, so those would be very individualized and flexible. Based on my reading of this, to the needs of individual schools and districts. So it would look very different from school to school based on where they are.
Fran?
I see that you have a district literacy plan, and I'm wondering, there's a couple of things I'm wondering. Having been a superintendent in a large city, I wonder if the literacy plan needs to be separate from a strategic plan, because sometimes we have so many plans that we don't pay attention. I would like to know how that would be streamlined. That's one piece. The other piece is I'm a curriculum person, and I know you say the district literacy plans are based upon current literacy curricula. I guess if I were advocating, I would like to see district literacy curriculum as a separate bullet, because I never want teachers to have to worry about what they need to teach. I want them to think about how they're going to teach it. So a district literacy curriculum that is very clear on what students need to know and be able to do by the end of each grade level, I think is incredibly important for, well, it's important for every subject area, but certainly important for literacy.
Thank you, Fran. And then, Fran, what would you suggest about that literacy plan and the strategic plan, seeing that they're...
I think at least saying that they're linked. Do you know what I mean? A link to the strategic plan. You know, I just don't want to see literacy fragmented from the priorities of the district, and the priorities of the district should be in that strategic plan. So, you know, it might be a separate plan, but it needs to be linked to the strategic plan.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to scooch down. And then once again, thumbs up when you're ready for me to move down. Dr. Brummett?
Thank you. I don't know if you saw what I put in the chat feature. I'm trying to wrap my head around, and this might be something colleagues would ask too. How does this gel or not gel with the approved programs? Is this meant to be, in addition to whatever approved program you're using, you should also have all of these components in your high quality literacy approach? If you could flush that out for me.
Sure. So right here, it talks about using these comprehensive core tier 1 evidence-informed or evidence-based literacy curricula programs. This is what the legislation is trying to establish across the districts. So by having the Connecticut approved programs available to districts, those are comprehensive core curriculum materials. Now, this strategy doesn't say that these, right now, it does not say that these are the Connecticut approved. Now, if you are suggesting or you want this to say that, we can have it say that. But right now, the strategy says that you should be using this comprehensive core tier 1 evidence-informed or evidence-based materials. Now, when we as a council originally looked at the documents that were then disseminated in May to gather the evidence-based programs and curricula that people were putting forward for review, we did outline, like Massachusetts, the various areas that were necessary for a program or a curricula to be considered this comprehensive core curricula or program. So that's what then the districts all filled out. And then that's also what we are now modeling the waiver application on. It's not finished yet, but like I shared before, it is posted on, there's drafts posted online for districts to start looking at. So I think that's, once again, I'm not sure I'm getting at the question that you're asking, but I'm hoping that it's laying the base for, or in some part, answering what you're asking. Fran and then Stephen, did you want to add to that?
I just want to add, I don't know if I'm adding or whatever, but you know, I said it at the last commission meeting and I will say it again. When we reviewed the programs, and I was a reviewer, they were programs, right? They weren't curriculum. When I think of curriculum, I think of teachers coming together with education leaders, looking at the research from around the country, and also looking at what states are doing in terms of great standards, looking at the Connecticut standards, looking at what that means in terms of, let's just say, grade 1. I then think of them coming together and developing curriculum and updating it. It used to be in the school districts that we updated curriculum every 5 years. We are in a 5-year cycle in every area. And in that curriculum, you had your goals, you had your objectives, and you had your strategies. And you were very clear on what, and your resources. The programs that we reviewed would have fit into resources. I just have a hard time calling curriculum and program by the same name, because I see curriculum as so different. And, you know, I was a curriculum director for many years. So I saw curriculum, you know, we would update our curriculum and then we would choose the resources that best met the goals and objectives of that curriculum. And we put a group of teachers again together with educational leaders to choose the resources, which would be the programs that we reviewed. I know that for everyone that might not be the thinking. Some people don't agree that you need written curriculum, but I thought it was a state statute that you had to have written curriculum. A written curriculum is not a program.
And that 100% agreed. And that's something that we've talked about not only here at the council, but outside the council. 100% agree. We have the curricula, We actually have a document that the academic office under Irene Parisi, who has joined us, welcome Irene, created about designing curricula and then breaking it into steps, and as to what step then are those programs and resources looked at to support the standards that are in the curricula. I think what's happening is there's confusion out there now about, especially even with our role of the council, what part is it that is this legislated piece? What part does this mean here? Regardless of legislation or not, schools need to be using these research-based materials and instruction, providing professional learning. And that's really what the strategy is saying, is that in order for us to be reaching the needs of all kids, there are certain things that we know need to be done. And that's starting, like Fran said, with the strategic plan, having these literacy plans in place, having teams and structures, having programs, curricula, resources. So it can be exactly like Fran was just saying, where teachers don't need to be scrounging, or like Margie was saying, trying to find materials to fill holes. They have these things here for them and are getting professional learning around it. So that's what we're really trying to do with this strategy, is say, what do all districts need to be doing to be successful? Now, many of our districts are doing this. This is not to cast judgment on anybody. It's just saying, what do we as a council feel like should be in the strategy that we know based on evidence works? What works? Stephen.
Well, thank you for that clarification. And Fran, that was really helpful to be able to distinguish between, I think, what I'm starting, or I imagine by how you describe as sort of the concentric circles, right?
Yes.
And within the concentric circle of curriculum is perhaps programmatic choices that are made once you've determined your path and how it is that you want to achieve it. Outside of that is, a larger strategy that has all these elements in it, including human resourcing elements, by the way. Who are the experts? How are leaders supporting teachers in this case? Perhaps with professional development, whatever the case may be. And it's interesting because I think there is a nod to the universe, I think, of programmatic choices that schools can make, understanding that they're not, that universe isn't going to be as limited as the department may initially choose based on the reviewer's recommendations. And that is evidenced by the waiver provision, which is very interesting, because as you develop the waiver, I'm reminded that the waiver itself said that there may be things that your review won't find, that are still scientific and evidence-based and that still meet the requirements. And I think that being very clear about the intention of the waiver, how it is meant to capture those instances where we may not either have a ready body of evidence 2 months ago, but 3 months from now we will. Just, understanding that this is an ever-evolving and developing set of tools, and that a lot of our partners who have been partners with us for so long in this work are rising to the challenge of science-based and evidence-based work. So I think that as you develop this waiver, more and more of that education, that clarification of the intent here, I think is critically important.
Thank you. And then Dr. Brummett, did you have something else to say too?
I do. Thank you so much. I wanted to agree with what Stephen said, because I wouldn't want a district that currently uses one of the approved programs to say, well, we're all set. We've gotten the blessing, because many of my colleagues who do have those programs are not getting great reading results. So I think it needs to be the totality of the circumstances, which does align with what Fran said, and now most recently, Dr. Hernandez. So thank you for kind of bringing that to light, that it's not just a program, but really a series of, I think they called it routines or practices that make for the whole reading program.
Melissa, can I say one quick thing?
Absolutely. And thank you for your patience as I'm taking both notes and trying to keep up on everything. And I'll scooch this down too. Yes, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, to consistent with what the rest of the group is saying, is that, as you pointed out, Melissa, high quality instructional tools for tier 1 classroom instruction is just one component of a larger, comprehensive, coordinated approach to improving reading outcomes for all students. So I think because these reading programs sort of list came out earlier in this process, in some ways it feels like it might be a little bit taking precedence over what you're sharing today, which is a much broader, more comprehensive framework for how schools and districts would support reading. And having a high quality instructional tool to guide that is hugely important. And like Fran was saying, that's something that schools have to make decisions about, how those programs are aligned with their unique needs and their internal kind of needs assessment. But there's many other components of this sort of larger strategy that include assessment that Joanne is going to be talking about, which includes interventions, which includes professional learning and coaching, which includes strong leadership, representative teaming structures in schools that can help make database decision making, that kind of links the assessment to ongoing differentiated instruction. So although these reading programs can be a really important tool and a sort of necessary tool, I think these kind of larger framework of the comprehensive alignment of practices and systems and supports really are what's, I think that should kind of take the limelight in terms of this kind of overall approach to improving reading.
I just have one more thing to say. Thank you, Michael. Teaching reading is complex, and it is not any one thing. There's no silver bullet. And I just want to share one thing with you, I think, which probably tells you, why I've been so dedicated to this for so many years. I started teaching in Bridgeport in the 70s. I'm really dating myself, but I started when I was like 5 years old, but I'm kidding. And I should have been arrested for malpractice with teaching reading in my first year. I was told, here's the basal, teach the kids. And I planned over the weekend so much for so many subject areas, but I didn't do a lot of planning for reading because I just followed the words of the basal until I found out that, 5 or 6 of my kids in 3rd grade could not read. And the basal wasn't helping me to do that. I had to go in search of other materials to help that. And that's why I absolutely believe that you need curriculum and you need to trust the professionalism of teachers and have for them the resources. I wouldn't want someone to have to go through what I went through to find those resources. They should be close at hand, but it's not any one thing that helps or promote success for every child. So thank you for that. And now I'll be quiet, I promise.
I'm sorry, Melissa, I have one more quick thing to say. And I agree with you, Fran, but I also just want to make the point for everybody here is that the most current core reading programs are so much different than sort of the old basal programs that we're used to from the past. They really have incorporated principles of effective reading instruction. They've been, because states and districts are calling for practices that are informed by the science of reading, that these programs now really incorporate differentiation, really incorporate assessment, really incorporate evidence-based practices. And so in a sense, they're very different looking programs and resources than the field has had in the past. And the other thing about that is that they have a built-in scope and sequence that that goes way beyond the kind of planning that we would want teachers to have to do by thinking of like how skills progress over time. So I think it really is important that, you know, that teachers are able to, in schools, kind of come up with the needs and curricula that I believe is separate from programs. But these kind of core resources that we're talking about now are much more supportive and much more aligned to what we know about the science of reading than even 5 or 10 years ago.
No, it's true, Michael. And I certainly worked with a new program in Bridgeport when I was superintendent. We had HMH, and yes, it was improved, but it's still not the answer for every single child. I also trained people in Wilson and a lot of other strategies that they needed to incorporate within their classroom, because that one program didn't meet the needs of every child.
Right, exactly. I just don't want teachers to think that, you know, what they need to do is go on their own, go out and develop from scratch strategies for students.
I absolutely don't believe that, but I do believe that teachers are professionals, and if they're trained well in the science of reading, and if the district provides them with you know, just different resources that they can use with different kids, then it's okay. I'm going to say one more thing. I also remember a time when Bridgeport went to whole language, and, you know, somewhere in the middle of my career there, they went to whole language, and, you know, I still believed in DISTAR, and, you know, there were times when teachers had to hide the DISTAR program because they weren't allowed to use it. That's what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? We should be able to use whatever it is we believe works with kids. And, you know, it's, and I think we're getting there in the science of reading. We're getting there in this commission, and I'm thrilled for that. But it's just been my experience with reading over the years has been a multi-tiered experience, and I'm thrilled that we are where we are today. And now I'll definitely be quiet. Sorry, guys.
No, I think everybody, I think this is a really important conversation. I think everyone is bringing up elements that are really important to be addressing, especially in the strategy. You know, the intent of this strategy is very much that it is a framework. It's kind of taking a step back and looking overall, much like Mike was saying. You know, it's really saying that there are these essential commitments. Like, what do you need to commit to? And here are those commitments: the commitment to literacy as a top priority, you know, saying that they have these literacy plans and literacy leadership, that high quality instruction is occurring in all classes. And then taking those pieces and kind of trying to break them down a little bit as to what does it look like. So here we have district and school literacy leadership. What are those effective research-based, scientifically based practices? And then looking at the capacity too, which is much of what you were saying about professional learning. Who needs resources? What do those schedules look like? Just, you know, how are we meeting the needs of all kids in a day? Looking at, and I think it was Stephen that referenced like the teacher capacity, the human capacity, here's spacing. All these things are in here, once again, at a more broad perspective than actually prescribing and saying you need to schedule this here and this then and that. But you need a master schedule. You need one so that you know when can your interventionists be going in and out, being shared among and between the classrooms. You know, what does that look like? That takes a lot of work on the part of teachers and administrators. Scheduling is an art. It is an art. And that's something that we've supported districts with all these years, and it's something that needs to be thought about. And do you have enough people to go across the schedule? And if not, what do you then do? So Once again, this is much more broad of the strategy. It incorporates what the legislation is saying. What I would love to do, and I know that we're getting short on time, and I do want to give Dr. White her time. If there's anyone who really does want to delve deeper into this, you know, get in there with your red pens or whatever color you have, and you want to help mark it up, I am so open to that, and would love to hear from you. So if you're on the council and you would like to do that, please email me and I can send you a copy of this. Then what we can do is come back again to the council to show you all as a whole what was done as a result. Does that sound like a good step forward? Anyone have any other idea? All right, already I think it's been very helpful. I tried to capture on paper as well as here some of the things that were coming up in our conversation. So I appreciate that. Any last thoughts or ideas about the strategy before I then segue over to Joanne? And I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint for her as well. All right, then Joanne, it is you, and I'm pulling the PowerPoint back up so I can get into your slides. Thank you all again. I really appreciate these conversations and the points and questions that you are always bringing to the table. I think it's really important. So thank you so much. All right, Dr. White.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hickey. All right, next we will shift our focus to one part of the larger system of comprehensive supports for reading success that highlights Section 10-14TA of the Connecticut General Statutes and which guides our work on K-3 universal screening reading assessments. As in past years, the State Department of Ed has approved a menu of research-based K-3 universal screening reading assessments for identifying students who are possibly below proficiency in reading. Also, these assessments serve to as progress monitoring tools and to identify students who are at risk for dyslexia. And so with that being said, of course, the expectation is that all districts will select and use a universal screening assessment from the approved menu so that students are screened in the areas of phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, and rapid automatic name or letter name fluency. And again, the expectation is that, you know, all districts will use one of the approved assessments, and also understand that the expectation is that the assessment outcomes will inform classroom instruction as well as supplemental instruction and intensive interventions. So thank you, Mike, for you know, a great segue to the universal screening reading assessments. As you very well stated, this is one part, important part of a larger system of supports to ensure reading success. So since the universal screening legislation was first introduced, we subsequently instituted an open review period so that districts could submit assessment recommendations to the State Department to include in the publication of the approved menu of K-3 reading assessments. With that being said, of course, specific guidance was provided to districts on that process. The process is comprehensive, and for this round, if you will, of submissions and the work that had to happen here at the State Department, we, of course, needed to address and consider the report of the Dyslexia Task Force. So that report informed the creation of this current menu. So as I said, the process is comprehensive. It includes districts understanding and identifying evidence of technical adequacy, and we also provided guidelines for efficiency standards. So these standards included aspects of reliability and validity. So for example, we were reviewing these assessments through the lens of evidence of test, retest reliability and internal consistency reliability, evidence of content and construct validity, classification accuracy, also determination of cut scores based on well-designed pilot studies with disaggregated data and standard setting processes. So certainly a stringent review of all assessments. So the following reading assessments were approved and per current legislation commencing July 1, 2023, students will, districts will be expected to select from this rather short list of approved assessments to use for screening students. Of course, additional guidance is forthcoming to ensure that there is an understanding of what the assessment outcomes indicate about reading development and how to support improved literacy development. Right now, we have currently published what we're calling a volume 1 of guidance. It's a frequently asked question document, but per legislation, additional guidance documents and technical assistance documents will be published. Because it's one thing to administer a fluency assessment, oral reading fluency assessment, for example, but then it's understanding what the outcome for that assessment is that subtest is indicating. So if a student reads fluently in connected text, it's an indication of what aspect of reading development. That's what districts need to know and understand. And then if students are not reading fluently in connected text, what does that indicate in terms of development? Does it mean that we provide additional practice with short passages where students can, should read faster, pick up the speed, make sure you're able to read smoothly with prosody, if you will? Or does it mean that we probably need to also consider, aspects of instruction related to the alphabetic principle, right? How we're assessing students' understanding of sounds as they map onto letters, putting the letters together to read words, and what that means in connected text. So lastly, I wanted to say that districts are wanting to know, why aren't computer adaptive assessments part of the list? Again, I point to the requirement that we needed to consider the report of the Dyslexia Task Force to inform the development of the revised universal screening reading assessments for grades K-3, that list that approved to menu. But also, districts should understand that they may continue to use computer adaptive assessments because specifically, in terms of content and construct validity, the computer adaptive assessments are aligned with the Connecticut Core Standards. And so that is a way, for example, to take stock of what's happening within and across grade levels in terms of curricula and materials, meeting the needs of students as aligned to Connecticut Core Standards. So those computer adaptive assessments, they do serve a purpose, a greater purpose, but as it relates to reading development and progress monitoring and engaging in the formative assessment process, these are the assessments that we need to focus on for K-3 reading development. Dr. Hickey, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, are there any questions around the assessments from the council members?
There are questions in the chat.
There are questions?
Dr. Hickey, yes.
The only one that I see is that Stephanie had to go because of dismissal. Am I missing one?
Yes, so Stephen Hernandez mentioned, should it be evidence-based and scientifically based?
Yes. And I did capture that on the strategy.
Okay,
Yep, thank you though.
okay. Okay, it could be that these are questions that were posted previously, so I understand.
Correct. And I don't know who's in the lobby. It's a phone number that I don't recognize. All right. So, we'll admit and we'll see who this is. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. White, for coming today. Thank you for answering questions from the council around the assessments. Like I said, that was their question. What are the assessments? How are they picked, etc. So thank you so much for addressing those questions here in your presentation. Much appreciated. We only have one more agenda item for today, and that is what you all had asked to be included on every agenda was an update on staffing. So please know that our commissioner is working very hard on the staffing issue. Just overall, there have been 5 postings for the agency since September 7th. And then a total of 11 vacancies and positions filled. There have been 3 additional postings that'll be posted within this week. There is recruitment under the way for 4 positions. So 4 positions were posted and closed, and recruitment is underway. Also, if anyone is interested, we are collecting, the State Department of Education is collecting letters of interest for the 2 deputy commissioner positions. Those can be submitted through the CSDE website with career opportunities, and she's working really hard to get additional postings in place. So the position for the permanent director is also one of these positions that have been moving along with interviews, and I will continue to keep you posted there. Once that person is in place, then the placement or the positioning of education consultants will begin as well. So that's just globally. Once again, just wanted you to know that the commissioner is dedicated to this and really, really pushing hard for so many of our vacancies to be filled. Dr. Quinn, did you have a question? I saw your chat go on and off.
I did. I think you answered it, but I was just going to ask
Okay.
again that there's none of the other staffing or positions in the reading center will be posted or recruited for until the director is in place.
Correct. Right. They want the new director to be part of that process.
Although that for sure is going to be a significant delay then until those positions are filled then.
It will take time. But like I said, the good thing is we have the commissioner who is pushing this forward. Irene has been moving these forward as well. Oh, sorry, Melissa Jenkins must have gotten kicked out and now she's back again. Okay. I just got to give a shout out to Leslie. I so appreciate everything she does during these meetings where she is writing the notes, letting people in and out, and assisting so much behind the scenes. For me to do it all today makes me even more grateful for her and her skills. So shout out to Leslie. Irene, did you want to say something right before we adjourned? Okay.
So just want to thank you for facilitating another great meeting. Thank you to Joanne, and certainly appreciate the conversation and the perspective the council brings. I don't know if you heard me because I know my speaker's going in and out.
Right. No, we heard you beautifully. Yes, we heard you beautifully. Thank you. And then you know what, too? I'd be remiss not to thank Dr. Jenkins. Dr. Jenkins spoke this week at last week at Performance Matters. Dr. Jenkins, do you want to share what you did? I mean, it was amazing and wonderful. And I thank Dr. White for setting all that up.
Thank you, Melissa. It was an opportunity to share how Bridgeport Public Schools uses the DIBELS 8th edition universal screener to support multi-tiered systems of support for children. So I appreciate the opportunity to share. We're a large district with even though we're a large district, we don't really have a large enough budget. And so I think it was helpful to share with people how we could implement the universal screener to meet the needs of children with limited staff and limited funds, that it is possible to move forward on behalf of children with limited resources. And that's not an excuse not to have more resources, but it shows that you can make progress on behalf of children. So it was a wonderful opportunity to share the work of a team here in Bridgeport on behalf of the children and families. Thank you, Melissa.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Her group was laughing and talking and their heads were down. People were taking notes. So people were finding it very beneficial. So thank you. So that was ending on a high note. Oh, now we have someone else in the lobby. All right. Anything else for good of the order before we adjourn? Okay, then. Ooh, I don't know why my screen is black, but all right. Thank you all so very much. Once again, appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being part of the council. If you are interested in taking that strategy, council members, adding to it, if you have thoughts around it, email me. I can send it to you and welcome your like I said, red lines or however you want to put it, your edits and your thoughts. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you,
Thank
Melissa.
you
All
for all
right,
your work,
take
Melissa.
care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.